Welcome to the Qasim Rashid Show, a civil rights lawyer here to expose all forms of injustice with a sprinkling of dad jokes in between. Here's your host, Qasim Rashid.
Good morning and peace be upon you wherever you're tuning in from. This is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We've got a great show lined up, and it's our first show within the Trump second term presidency. And there's just a lot to cover. I read a tweet this morning that why did it seem like Biden's hands were tied, but somehow Trump is all powerful? And if you look at the executive orders he signed, I think over 200 within the first 24 hours of being sworn in, it's a valid question to ask. Everything from releasing 1,500 white supremacist insurrectionists, many of them who were violent and committed violent felonies. Meanwhile, Biden waited till the very, very last second to sign a partial commutation for Leonard Peltier. And, we're going to talk a bit more about that in detail. But, we've got two amazing guests on today. Dara Star Tucker is here. She's a brilliant vocalist, songwriter. She is also the host of her own amazing show on Radio Free 102.3 KJLH in Los Angeles. We also have Tim Whitaker, who is the founder of the New Evangelicals, a left-wing Christian evangelical group. Yeah, left-wing group. It's amazing. I love the work he's doing. And we're going to be talking about this. Before we dive in, I want to do a quick fact check on some of the rhetoric and comments Trump made in his inauguration remarks. And really, you saw a theme in these remarks. You saw him say something or claim something and then announce actions which actually completely contradict the thing that he said. And we saw this happen over, you talked about renewal and proud and prosperous and free. And then he talked about some draconian policies that are the exact opposite of that. He talked about bowing and praising Dr. King and upholding his legacy and making his dream a reality. And then he talked about making us a colorblind society, which is the exact opposite of what Dr. King talked about and worked for. But let's go even beyond that. His first term is an indication of what the second term is going to be like. Studies show that he made over 30,000 false statements in his first term. Lies. And these weren't harmless lies that were calculated to sow distrust and abandon our allies and to just flat out lie about national security. He talks about being the peacetime president, but we know he escalated militarism aggressively, massively increased the U.S. military budget, funneled billions, hundreds of billions to defense contractors, dropped more bombs than Bush and Obama combined, all while doing nothing to pass any kind of infrastructure bill or tech bill or manufacturing bill. The single legislative achievement that he had was a massive tax cut for billionaires. Remember the racist policies that he enacted, the Muslim ban, the harsh immigration policies, separating children from parents, refused to condemn white supremacist violence, told Proud Boys to stand back and stand by, calling Nazis very fine people, rolled back housing protections that reduced racial discrimination on Black and Latino Americans. He laid the groundwork to repeal affirmative action. He gutted Roe v. Wade. He, gutted voting rights. And this is what I mean when I say, don't believe his lies, look at his actions. This is where the James Baldwin wisdom comes in, that I can't believe what you say because I see what you do. And that's what's happening right now. And so when you look at the fact check, he talks about declaring a national emergency on the southern border. I wrote recently how this is a made-up emergency. Trump not only kiboshed the immigration deal, the bipartisan immigration deal, but the facts show that it's not immigrants who are committing mass crime or bringing in drugs. It's actually U.S. citizens, but he's not willing to invest in that. He talked about how he's going to order his cabinet to bring down record inflation. Well, inflation is already down into the 2%. It was not caused by overspending, as he claims. It was caused by a global post-COVID recovery. And the U.S. recovered faster than every other developed country in the world. He talked about declaring a national emergency on energy and drilling. Well, this is all happening while the California wildfires are going on, caused in major part by climate change and by oil companies like Exxon. He's going to make the situation even worse than it already is and accelerate the devastation of climate change. He talked about overhauling our trade system and imposing tariffs on foreign imports, not realizing these will be paid for by the American people. Or maybe he does realize that. I don't really know anymore. But the fact is, he doesn't understand how tariffs work. And his followers, unfortunately, don't understand how they work either. And then the next two things was really ironic. He wants to establish a Department of Government Efficiency, and he wants to establish an external revenue service. So to become more efficient, he's going to establish two new departments, both of which are completely irrelevant. And by the way, the Department of Government Efficiency, I think they've already gotten rid of Ramaswamy. So he was the first one to be cut, which is ironic. This made me chuckle a little bit. He wants to sign an EO to stop all government censorship. I don't know what that means, but what I do know is that he just sued ABC and forced them to settle for $15 million on the allegation, on their credible statement as affirmed by a New York judge that he is an adjudicated rapist in civil court. And ABC capitulated because corporate media is capitulating to fascism. He wants to make it the official policy of the US government that there are only two genders. This is just scientifically inaccurate. Like, it's just so asinine and stupid. His targeting of trans people, of LGBTQ people, is just, this is not bringing down the price of eggs. It's raising the level of hatred and bigotry. He talks about merit-based for everything, while protecting legacy admissions and protecting Jim Crow policies and repealing affirmative action. He wants to reinstate service members who were expelled due to rejecting the COVID vaccine with full back pay, not realizing that even George Washington required inoculation to fight in the Continental Army. He wants to end all wars. Meanwhile, he is promising to forcibly take back the Panama Canal and rename the Gulf of Mexico, which has been named as such for 400 years, to the Gulf of America, threatening China while at it, invoking manifest destiny, a violent white supremacist policy to expand the United States by force by mass murdering indigenous Americans and forcing enslaved Africans to do the work of infrastructure. Everything he said verbally was contradicted by his actions, and we need to be aware of that. And so bring on, in a few minutes, my two amazing guests, Dara Tucker and Tim Whitaker, who've been at the forefront of addressing these injustices for a long time. I want to talk about what role does race play in all this and what role does religion play in all this, because both of these individuals are very heavily involved with different Christian communities. And as we know, it was white evangelicals who got Trump across the finish line and helped him win, not just in 2016, but also in 2024. And white Americans in general voted overwhelmingly for Trump in all three elections. So when we come back from break, we're going to bring them on. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button. One thing we've learned is that complicit corporate media is going to continue to elevate Trump. And it's not just one outlet. Washington Post, owned by Bezos, is censoring criticism of Trump. Twitter, owned by Musk, has become Trump's platform. Zuckerberg owns Facebook. He's going to stop fact-checking, which has led to violence in other countries. He's going to try to bring that here. Wall Street Journal, owned by Murdoch, is facilitating Trump's fascism. And so we can't rely on these billionaire-owned corporate media outlets because they're already capitulating and paying homage to Trump. ABC capitulated to Trump already. CNN is whitewashing. And so we need to ensure we are investing in people and in voices that are going to uphold a sense of justice and fairness. I hope to have your support. Hit that subscribe button. When we come back from break, we're going to bring on Dara Tucker and Tim Whitaker. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban News Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button so we can continue this advocacy. I'm extraordinarily excited. Two of my favorite people are here. Dara Star Tucker is making her return to the show, as well as Tim Whitaker. Dara is a brilliant vocalist, a songwriter, social media sensation, an artist, a historian. And she has her own amazing show at Radio Free 102.3 KJLH in Los Angeles, where she just moved to. Tim Whitaker, creator and facilitator of the New Evangelicals, a left-wing Christian evangelical group. You heard that right, left-wing evangelicals. He is a white man and will be speaking for all white people everywhere. Tim, Dara, great to have you with us.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. It means a lot.
Absolutely. It's hard to ask, how are you doing? Because the world around us is literally on fire, especially if you're, in Los Angeles, for example, and just in general, metaphorically on fire. But I know you two are doing the work, and I wanted to have you on in this first show after Trump's second inauguration to kind of talk about that. Just before we dive in, your initial thoughts, how are you feeling? Where are we? What are you kind of doing to get through these days right now? Dara, why don't you check it out?
Well, what am I doing to get through these days? I think I've just found a place of very careful detachment, even having just moved to California to take on a news position. I'm the director of news and public affairs here at KGLH Radio, this 102.3 here in Los Angeles. And so it's a very interesting thing to be taking on a news position right now in this particular climate, even to have just moved here during, at the height of the wildfires. It's just, I feel like I'm in a little bit of a tumbling, drum or something. But I think, the body and the mind and the spirit just kind of have a way of regulating themselves if you allow them to. And which is how we're kind of able to get through, I think, extraordinary experiences that we maybe would have thought would have been detrimental to us. And so at this point, I think there's a certain amount of healthy detachment that has set in. Most of what I see, I've already known with, you all being in the social commentary space as well. We've all known that this was coming. And so this is not a surprise. We're not just kind of watching fireworks. We are watching fireworks pop off, but we knew the fireworks show was coming. So to a certain degree, I have been a little bit prepared mentally and spiritually for this for a while. Now, watching a Nazi salute on a national stage, yesterday, a couple of days ago, that I wasn't really quite prepared for. But, the policies and the executive orders, I think, there's a part of me that just is like, all right, we're just going to watch it play out. So it's a careful detachment is how I would explain my state of mind right now.
Tim, Dara made a comment just now that made me think about our conversation at the DNC, where she said that we saw this coming. And you and I hung out at the DNC. We sat together and watched Kamala Harris's remarks, her acceptance speech. And you turned to me and said, what do you think is going to happen? And I said, right now, I don't see how we win. And so for me, and we can talk about why I don't see how we win because of the policies, but when we talk about we saw this coming, how is that impacting you and your faith and your work?
I'm just so angry. I'm so much rage coursing through my veins. And part of it is because I grew up in the Christian tradition that has given the world Trump. And it's very difficult to reconcile growing up in a space where you were taught to love Jesus and taught songs as a child. Jesus loves the little children of the world, right? Song Jesus loves me, this I know, only to see those same people who raised me in this faith celebrate and just really become something else entirely. Now, that being said, this has always been there throughout American history. I'm learning that more and more as I've kind of had my eyes opened. But watching so many faith leaders and this white Christian world that I grew up in be the reason we have Trump, the reason Elon Musk did a Nazi salute on that stage is because of what white evangelicals have supported for so long. And it's really, it makes me livid. It also makes me frustrated beyond belief to grow up in a world that seems or tells you they're so focused on truth. Truth matters. Truth matters. The truth matters. And then they trade that truth for a lie by embracing Trump. Like I cannot believe still 4 years after doing this work and following all of this stuff and being deeply embedded in Christian nationalist circles. I've gone to Turning Point USA events. I've met Charlie Kirk. I do the work to understand these people. And I cannot believe the blatant lies that they embrace and espouse as truth. And then again, watching Christians, people who raised me, say, yeah, that person's speaking real truth. I'm like, what world are we living in? Maybe one quick example of that is watching white evangelical Christians and media pundits tell the world that Elon Musk did not give a Nazi salute. Like, guys, we all saw it. He did it twice. Look, we can A and B actual Nazis and Elon doing the same thing. And they're like, no, he was just giving his heart out. It's not what you think. It is that part for me drives me bananas. Like my mind, my head just wants to roll off of my shoulders because I see this and I go, what world have we created? And how is my faith responsible for so much of this?
You know, there's a quote attributed to Hitler. It's an authentic quote where he says that our movement is Christian and we do not tolerate anybody who insults our religion in our ranks. And the irony is, I don't think Elon Musk is a Christian. I think his own family has been clear that he's probably an atheist of some sorts, or he has no actual religious affiliation. But he's commandeering and hijacking Christianity for his purposes. And right now, as Trump is issuing executive orders, trying to block all immigration, and some of these are beyond cruelty, about 16 to 1,700 Afghans who have been cleared by the US government to be refugees, to resettle in the United States. These are Afghans, by the way, who helped US soldiers against the Taliban, Afghans who are children of US service members. So they're Afghan Americans, and Trump is blocking them from being resettled. I tweeted about it, and on Twitter, I will always call it Twitter, one of the most common responses I got was good riddance. And you see the bios of these folks, and every single one is indebted to Christ, saved by the grace of Christ. It is because of Christ that I have life. And I'm like, how on earth do you reconcile that with telling a brown refugee go to hell and burn there? And you know, Dara, we were talking off air about how a couple of years ago, almost a decade ago now, about 7, 8 years ago, I attended a religion and journalism conference, and there's one group had done polling on the Christian groups that had voted for Trump, and they couldn't figure out why white evangelicals and conservatives voted Trump and black evangelicals and conservatives still voted Hillary Clinton. They're like, we just can't understand how they're both conservatives, but one side overwhelmingly voted Trump and the other side overwhelmingly voted Clinton. As a black woman in America who grew up in a Christian tradition, what was kind of your, no pun intended, come to Jesus moment and realizing the integration of racism within the right-wing white Christian communities?
It was always something that we kind of understood. It was just sort of an understood kind of thing. I mean, we definitely had our own experiences with it. I grew up partly, my grandmother was a Pentecostal holiness pastor. So we had one foot in that church. And then my father, who was a music minister, kind of came out of that church and ministered at more like evangelical, a lot of white evangelical churches. And some of them were kind of racially mixed just because he was there and they wanted, you know, some good music. So he helped to kind of diversify some of the churches that we were at. So I grew up, you know, kind of deeply entrenched in the white evangelical world. So we really had a deep understanding of a lot of these issues from early on, but it really kind of took on a new depth, I think, after the George Floyd killing, and to see how much excuse making was being done around that, and how many people wanted to latch on to this narrative about him being this criminal that supposedly had it coming or deserved what he got, or it wasn't really, you know, the police department didn't really kill him. No, he was just on fentanyl or whatever it was. You know, and that started with what is his name, Trayvon Martin, and you know, you start to see certain things online. So I guess really with the advent of social media, you start to kind of see some of the separations that are made between those camps. But yeah, it was kind of a slow enlightenment process that really came to a head with the George Floyd killing.
You know, and we've talked to him about kind of your journey from being right wing to just being now a decent human being. And I don't want to paint anyone right wing as a non-decent human being, but for the sake of discussion, you've said it before that you were kind of in the thick of it with the Charlie Kirks and the Ben Shapiro's of the world. And now I see your advocacy, and it really is inspiring, because I think you do not just an effective job of kind of speaking truth to power and acknowledging where you were wrong, but, and I'll make you blush a little bit. You do what a lot of white men don't do, and that's also acknowledge your privilege and say, you know what, I am coming from a different place where I'm being afforded the opportunity to admit I was wrong and to do better, not have that baggage behind me. That's why I made the joke earlier that you're speaking for all white men everywhere, because Dara knows this as a Black woman. I know this as an immigrant, as a brown Muslim. We make one mistake and suddenly we're speaking for our entire communities. And now all Black women are incapable of becoming president. All Muslims are responsible for 9/11. And white men don't have that burden. How are you finding that journey, and how are you being deliberate and conscious about that? And I want you to, and I'm asking this question, not because I don't know the answer, but I want other white men listening to hear from you, kind of your perspective, and because I think that the perception is that admitting you were wrong or wanting to improve is weakness, when to me that's actually what strength looks like.
Yeah, well, honestly, it's not that difficult. As a Christian, you're just taught early on that repentance is important, right? Repenting of your sin, going and turning and going the other way is key to who you are as a human. I've never lost my faith. I went deeper and got more radical into my faith, and that's what made me leave white Jesus behind. I grew up in this world that radicalized me to love my neighbor and to take the words of Jesus very seriously and never to compromise, no matter who tells me to. So when I saw my faith tradition compromising the very clear Beatitudes, loving your neighbor well, loving your enemy, blessed are the meek, not the rich and powerful, right? I said, well, I'm not going to capitulate my values and my integrity for where you guys are heading, because something is way wrong here. So, a lot of my work in my own journey has just been, frankly, trying to be as consistent as possible with my, what I call as a radical allegiance to the way of Jesus. One of the biggest discrepancies between Christian nationalism and Jesus is that Jesus tells us to bear a cross for our enemies, and Christian nationalism wants to build new crosses for theirs. Right. So it's just at its root, the whole message is so contradictory. I do want to just point out one quick thing too that I think is really important here. In America, there really are two very different Christian traditions. There's the white Christian tradition and the Black Christian tradition. And I had the privilege this past Monday for MLK Day to interview Dr. Reverend Otis Moss III, one of the most influential Black pastors in America. His father marched with MLK. I got the chance to sit down in his office and talk about the fact that MLK Day and Trump's inauguration coincided and what that means and how it's really representative of those two different Christianities, right? Because you have one Christianity, MLK, his faith is what launched him into the civil rights movement, fighting for poor people, etc., because of the scriptures, because of that. And then you have white Christians today justifying Trump and saying it's great that we want mass deportations because our faith compels us to do that. So really, in my perspective, you can use, this can go for any religion, but in this context, Christianity, you can use the Bible as a tool for liberation or a weapon of oppression. And when I was faced with that choice, I said, I want to make sure that my faith does what Jesus tells me to do, which is to liberate the oppressed, stand in solidarity with the marginalized, right? And fight for the well-being of all my neighbors. So to me, it wasn't like I had this, oh my God, I've been so wrong. I realized that as I went down the path, but it was more of like, this isn't lining up. It's not consistent with my own values of trying to follow Jesus. So what I'm doing now to me makes complete sense, because I made a profession of faith early on as a child. I said I would never compromise my faith. And to this day, that's what I believe I'm doing. And I would love to know, what Dara thinks about that, because it sounds like we have some overlap in our faith traditions, and also some very different places that we come from this at.
I don't know. It's from my point of view, it is hard to get my head around how a lot of the folks that I grew up with ended up where they are right now. It just is, it's incongruent, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to my brain. And it's just causes me to question the judgment and the sincerity of a lot of them, frankly. And I need to get to the point. I won't even say I've gotten to the point, because I haven't gotten to the point where I stopped trying to make it make sense. I am getting closer to the point where I'm just ending that battle within myself because, we were taught to empathize with people. Empathy is a really important quality to have and a skill to have, and you want to empathize, you want to understand, especially where serious issues like this are concerned, with people that you always felt or were told were fundamentally decent people. But I think that there's something that can be compromised within yourself when you really try to get your mind and your spirit to understand, to try to defend the indefensible. It's really a process that can corrupt you as a person. So I think really you do have to, as you're saying, just kind of draw that line of demarcation and say, look, all I can understand is how to live out the values that have been taught to me, and this is the path that I see towards that, and stop trying to understand why people have landed where they've landed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
If you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Darsar Tucker and with Tim Whitaker. You should be following them both on social media, on all the platforms, because they're amazing. At that point right there, Dara, I think it kind of hits home with me, because I often find myself thinking, what do we do from here? How do we reach folks who have bought into saying that a Nazi salute is okay? It's not a deal breaker. How do we reach folks who have bought into the idea that a man convicted in a civil court of rape is not a big deal? It's just okay. It's kind of mind blowing to me. You've got a nomination of Pete Hegseth as defense secretary,
Yeah.
one of the most important positions in the world, in charge of 3 million people, in charge of 6,000 nuclear weapons. A guy who has calls himself a Christian crusader and wants to Christianize the military. And I tell people, put yourself in the opposite perspective. Let's say that this was whatever Muslim country you want, and the person being appointed to their defense secretary wants to wage Islamic jihad on people and Islamicize the military and have an Islamic bomb. Like, would you be okay with that? You wouldn't be. You shouldn't be. I'm not okay with that. That would mortify me. The people who look at that and be like, you know what? That's a really good idea. There's nothing more Jesus-like than giving a guy 6,000 nuclear weapons who wants to have a Christian crusade. How do we reach these folks? Like, how do we even start the conversation there?
Well,
Um,
sorry, I don't want to interrupt
Go
you.
ahead, go ahead, Tim.
Well, as a white former evangelical, I wrestle with this question a lot because I'm going to be very honest with both of you and with the audience. I changed my tune on this. A couple years ago, when I was first doing this work in the beginning, I would think we got to find the common ground. We got to find a way forward. Now, obviously, I don't believe in violence, so I still believe that on a macro level. But when it comes to, in particular, the leaders and like your real hardline adherents, like your Christian nationalist adherents, I only see resistance at this point, because you have to understand, when you're taught at age 5 that you're in the Lord's army, these are real songs that we sing,
Yeah.
that you're in the Lord's army, yes, sir. And that, God has given America a divine calling, that we as Christians have to pray at the flagpole in our public schools to take a stand for Christ. And we have to withstand the schemes of the enemy, which really is code for like liberals. When you're taught that at age 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it does something to you where all you see is a mission to take over, period. And to Dara's point earlier, the way you understand how people justify this is you look through the lens of power and control. What gives these people the most power and control? That's ultimately what they care about. They care about being in charge. This is your Lance Wallnau, Seven Mountain Mandate theology. This is, if you want to go even earlier in American history, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, R.J. Rushdoony popularized Christian theonomy, the idea that we have to replace American civil law with Old Testament law. There's a tradition here. Maybe you never heard of it. Maybe I didn't even know about it growing up in the circles, but it was certainly upstream from what I was drinking in. And so when it comes to your real hardliners, all I see on the political level and like the macro level is resistance all the way. Wait, we have to resist their laws, their rules, their perspectives. That doesn't mean I won't sit down with them and talk to them one-on-one over dinner or something. But my gosh, like I'm gonna fight them tooth and nail because what they want is an eradication of certain people groups. I mean, Michael Knowles last year says that we have to eradicate transgenderism. And again, what do most white evangelicals do? Well, he didn't mean like killing people. What else could he possibly mean? You know, Elon Musk does a Nazi salute. No, he was giving his heart out. Guys, what will it take for you to wake up and realize that the world you're a part of is white nationalism? Like that's what it is. And so if you won't see it when Elon Musk does a Nazi salute, it's like debating a flat earth. I'm not going to debate a flat earth or a round earth with people. The earth is round. It's objective. It's true. And I'm not going to get into the weeds of people over, did Elon really give a Nazi? If we're debating that, I'm not debating you. I'm just going to resist you. That's kind of where I'm at with this at this point.
I don't know who said it first. I put it out as well on social media that if you really don't think it was a Nazi salute, go ahead, record yourself doing that exact same thing and send it to your employer, send it to your kid's teacher, and see what happens. And Dara, I want to hear your thoughts, but I just wanted to add one addition to Tim's comment. You know, I've written extensively on this peer-reviewed research on kind of the history of this prior to even the establishment of the United States and to the laws passed in the colonies that asked about the role of enslaved people and Christianity. And the justification that came up was, well, one, we need to enslave these heathens and bring them to Christ. And so the data says that up to 30% of the enslaved Africans were Muslim, another 25-30% were African tribal religions, and about another 30% were Christian, but they were the wrong African Christians. We had to bring them to white Christianity. And so they stripped them of their identities, of their language, of their cultures. They force-fed Muslims pork, drank them alcohol, forced them into different marriages and different relationships. That happened to all. But the key question then came up is, wait, now they're accepting Christianity, so now they're our brothers in Christ. So do we have to free them now? Is that? And the legislative solution was, well, true, they are now Christians, but the price of us freeing them from eternal damnation is, servitude to us in this life. And so the justification was, even though they are now our brothers in Christ, they owe us big because we saved them from eternal damnation. And so now they have to serve us our entire lives as part of the payback for this huge favor that we did to them. And when you look at the policies being enacted today, I think you could draw pretty much a straight line to that same mentality from 300, 400 years ago. But I just wanted to, but Dara, your thoughts on all this?
It's a lot. Like I said, I've kind of stopped trying to find ways to sort of do the tap dance and get inside of their heads and figure out why they're doing what they're doing. I think people operate in a way that is generally is self-serving. So if it's, if there's a path that they feel is going to protect them, is going to protect the people that they love, they may not even understand all the motivations behind why they're doing what they're doing. But where I lay a lot of the blame, and I think Tim was kind of, pointing right at this, where I lay a lot of the blame is with leadership. He talked about the 7 Mountains Mandate and all of this stuff. And these are terms that, a lot of us who I grew up, deeply in the evangelical church, and we never really heard terms like this. There are preachers and leaders who want to communicate this stuff to their church bodies. And there are some who simply listen to these leaders and read these books and ingest these principles and never really communicate it to people. But they are operating with these motivations. And so a lot of this stuff it's very insidious, and it's being worked into our church culture. White church culture has been for 50 years, but a lot of people just may not know about it. And so, a lot of the, I'm sure Tim has his experience with, the purity movement and all kinds of movements where our parents were banning everything from the Smurfs to, God knows what. Everything was evil. Everything had spirits and Pokemon and, those are little demons and all this stuff. This stuff
I
comes
couldn't watch
down.
Captain Planet.
Oh, we couldn't watch anything. I mean, we just couldn't watch anything. And all of this, and it sounds so silly now, but it's like all
Yeah.
of our moms were listening to James Dobson. They were all listening
Right.
to James Robinson and watching the 700 Club and, whatever their sources were for where they were getting this information. That is what created this unity of thought and the way that they behaved. And we all now get together and we compare stories, and it's like, oh, okay, well, your mom started talking about that at this time, and then we got restricted from that and we couldn't do this, and so these directives are coming down from on high, which is why I say this really has a lot more to do with leadership and the desire to maintain control. It's a very heady thing, and it's very serious, and most people probably wouldn't understand or believe how intentional all of this is, but it really has a lot to do with manipulation and control of the masses through religion.
We're speaking with Dara Star Tucker and Tim Whitaker, and we're down to our last couple of minutes. I'll tell you where I do find hope, guys, and that is in activating those who are disengaged, because I feel like people who are disengaged, in my experience, are typically disengaged not because they're evil or because they're bad or because they have this, desire for power, as you talked about, which I think is both of you made an extraordinarily accurate assessment. I feel like they're disengaged because they just don't necessarily see a path forward. They're like, what difference does it make? It's kind of hopeless. And it sounds ironic, but I find hope in that, because to me, these are folks, if you got to a point of hopelessness, it's because at one point you had hope and you just felt betrayed, or you felt like nobody really cares. And so in my experience, showing you care goes a long way. And in the last election, 31% of Americans voted for Trump, just under 31% voted for Harris, and 36% sat out altogether. Just said, we're just not going to be involved as well. And so to me, a lot of it is kind of activating those masses. And that's really where I see a lot of the work you guys are doing. I think whether you know it or not, every so often, and that's probably not generous enough, with a degree of regularity, I see folks in my DMs say, hey, you should see this thing by this guy, Tim Whitaker. It's brilliant. And he's given me a new perspective on this stuff. Or you should see this thing that Dara Star Tucker put out there. People tend to DM me stuff constantly, like, just quick rant. Like, if I wanted to follow your content, I would just follow you. You don't need to send me 18 DMs a day. Like, that sounds arrogant, I know. But it's like, because it's frustrating, because like I have actual emails from people who have like legitimate questions, but it's like, here's 18 reels from Dara. It's like, I love Dara, but I can call her. I don't need sending me 18.
I'm glad it's not just me, by the way. Thanks for saying that.
No,
how about when they send you Qasim Rashid reels and they're not even watching my stuff? I'm like, are you watching what I just put out?
I just said that,
Right.
Right. I'm telling you. But those folks they do give me hope. It shows to me that we need to get so in this last couple of minutes, and take as much time as you need, because we're good on time, but what are some action items? And this is one of the key questions that I get constantly from folks. That, look, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm depressed, I'm upset, but give me something to do. Like, how can I take meaningful action? So when we talk about action items, I think about the fact that not everybody is fortunate. I mean, we each have millions of followers on social media. We have our shows and our programs. And I think we can both acknowledge that we've worked our asses off to build these platforms. And we have the privilege of these platforms to get our messages out. The majority of folks are not out on the forefront in this space, but they want to play a role. So what can folks do? And Tim, I'll start with you, but what can folks do? What action items can they take to play some kind of a meaningful role to kind of move the ball forward, to advance humanity, to advance a sense of decency in our country?
Well, I mean, there are a few quick things that you can think about. Number one, I mean, local activism is really important. I think getting involved in local politics. Who is your mayor? Who's on the school board? Can you get involved? Do you have time? Are your kids in the public school system? How can you get more involved as a parent? So those are some easy steps, I think, just to make a difference. Volunteer somewhere. I also know that we are in late stage capitalism and that a lot of us are just trying to survive. And I'm one of them. I mean, you're looking at my guest bedroom. If people who can see this, like, I don't have a studio. Okay. I totally understand. Another way you can help be the change you want to see is just support creators that you love, share their content, maybe sign up for their Substack if they have it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge to Qasim. Dara, I'm not sure if you have one, but if you do, even better. You know, like, we're a nonprofit organization. I will tell you something, and we've talked about this before. The right-wing media ecosystem has billionaires dumping unlimited amounts of money into those platforms that allow them to amplify such damaging, and by the way, untrue narratives about immigrants and queer people and those who are really, you know, marginalized in this society. And it's very hard to fight back when you have a shoestring staff, aka me or you. You know, you're trying to do Substack, you're trying to do podcasts, you're trying to do a short form Instagram reel, you're trying to go on TikTok, you're trying to do a thread post. It's a lot of work. And the good news, though, is that if everyone gives $5 a month to their favorite creator, or maybe a few creators, right? Maybe you budget out $20 a month and it's $5 each, whatever it is. Those little bits add up to allow people to do the work to send the messages that you want to see go forward. Another option I'll say, then I'll give it over to Dara, is you don't have to think about financial incentive. Just share the content. Share someone else's reel. Get bold on your social media. I know for a fact a lot of people are worried about sharing my content, maybe yours, Qasim, because they're afraid of what their family might say. Take the risk. Do it. Share the thing. Say it. We have to take some bold stands. No, Nazi salutes are not okay in America. Period. No, the January 6th insurrection was not a mostly peaceful protest. And it's unethical that Trump has pardoned all of them, including people who beat up police officers. You have to start using your voice and taking the stands and then taking the bullets, especially if you're a white person in this country. It should not be on black women or other people to do the work that white people should be doing, especially white men like me. We have to be the ones who have no problem saying, no, I'm taking this stand, come what may. I'm going to say the quiet parts out loud. That's how we use our privilege for good, right? I can't control how I was born, what my body's like when I was born in history. I can't control any of that, but I can control what I do with it. And so I really think especially white people need to really own their stuff. They need to decolonize, not just go liberal, but decolonize and think about the empire that we live in and start doing the actual work. Welcome to the rebellion. This is what it takes. Stand in solidarity, taste the sting of oppression, and get in the weeds, and let's get to work.
Love it. Beautiful. Dara, you get to take us out.
I actually don't have much more to add to that. I mean, I think that, you know, he said it all, really, just the hyper local focus. Like I said, I have reached a point of slight detachment, I think, in just understanding that we don't really have the ability to control other people. That realization has really helped me in all of this. I've been talking to, you know, some folks. I talked to my sister a couple days ago who said she's still struggling and still having a problem psychologically, just getting past the election results and like, oh, this is just going to be so horrible. It's like, well, you know what? There was a decent portion of the electorate that wanted this. They wanted it. So we have to be able to acknowledge, first of all, that it's going to have to play out. We are going to have to allow this to play out. If you have the energy to bear witness to it, then you can engage in that. I don't necessarily have the energy to engage with it on a daily basis, even though, as I said, I've taken a news job and I have to report on it. But again, Tim said it. It's like finding those voices like Qasim's. He's one of the primary voices that I use, who I'll just do a quick perusal of his newsletter, not saying I'm getting that deep into it, but just, you know, kind of hitting the major points. I have some major outlets that I use as sources just because of the work that I do and because I want to stay plugged in, but then supporting those independent content creators too, whose voices that you can trust. And just as Tim said, finding a little bit of room in your budget to financially support them can go a long way. If more people thought in that way, there would be so many more of us who could just make a living doing what it is that we do. And I think we have all kind of been let down by the mainstream news in this last election cycle. We have been just severely let down. And it's been a lot of the more independently minded people that have really they've, you know, been the flag bearers for consistency and for truth. And, you know, again, people like you, Qasim. So I would say, I would repeat exactly what Tim has said. Find a way to get involved with your local community, with your neighbors. You know, how can you be of use in your own town, in your own city, on your own street, in your own family? and really put yourself to good use as much as possible, and then support the people who are independently out there and are engaged in the fight.
The one thing I'll add to the really beautiful and thoughtful comments both of you have made is once you do that, you will be shocked. Give it 1 year, just 1 year. You will be shocked at how quickly people will start to look at you as, oh, this is the leader that we need to rally around, and how quickly you'll grow a community. And suddenly you're going to be like, wait a minute, what just happened here? But it's going to come from a place of authenticity because you're doing the work, and people will follow your lead. You guys, it's been a privilege to have you on as well. Before you go, very quickly, Tim, Dara, if you could just plug, how can folks find you online? How can they support your work?
Yeah, sure. You can find our work anywhere that the word "the new evangelicals" is. So that's Instagram, that's TikTok, that's on Twitter, that's Threads. We have a podcast that we do. We have a YouTube channel that's growing. So you can find all of our content there.
So I would say, first of all, before we leave, Tim, you're going to have to come out and do a tutorial for me on how to get my setup looking like yours. I have tried and tried for years. The lighting, the audio, everything is the background, everything is just top notch.
No
So I'm
problem. I'm
super,
there.
super
I'm there.
salivating right now. But you can find me at Dara Star Tucker. That's DARASTARR. Dara with one R and Star with two. Dara Star Tucker on most platforms. Instagram, I'm Dara Tucker B, and I think I'm Dara Tucker B on Threads as well.
Dara Star Tucker, Tim Whitaker, two of my favorite people on this planet Earth. Grateful to have them with us today. Make sure you follow them on their respective platforms, Dara Star Tucker and the New Evangelicals. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. When we come back from break, I'm going to do a quick recap. Trump's anti-immigrant raids have started, and we're going to go over a couple of quick action items on what you can do to be an ally to immigrants, particularly the undocumented immigrants, as they try to resist this Trumpian fascism. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show on the multiverse. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit subscribe. Tim Whitaker, Dara Star Tucker, two people I admire, I cherish deeply because just of their compassion and their love of humanity. They are doing the hard work in the trenches. Highly recommend you follow them. Follow Tim at the New Evangelicals and Dara at Dara Star Tucker across platforms. I know Dara's launched a Substack as well, so make sure you hit subscribe there. We're down to like the last 3 minutes, so I just want to very quickly talk about the Trump ICE raids and what you should be doing. Look, it's going to get bad. It's going to get worse. And I don't want to sugarcoat it and say it's going to be okay. Well, it might not be, and it already isn't for a lot of people. But there's actions you can take. One, contact your local school board and your local teachers union. Ask them what Trump raids mean to them. Are they going to protect undocumented children? Trump just repealed a rule forbidding ICE from raiding schools, houses of worship, and hospitals, other sensitive locations. Contact your school board. Make sure they are going to be protecting undocumented children and what you can do to be involved. Remember, be involved locally. If you are undocumented and you're stopped by ICE, by Immigration Customs Enforcement, do your best to remain calm, as difficult as it is. Have your A number memorized, have the number of your lawyer or your family member memorized. Expect your phone to be taken away. Do not lie to ICE agents. You are not allowed to lie. They are allowed to lie to you. Do not lie to them. Do not present them any fraudulent documents. But more importantly than that, do not speak to ICE agents without your lawyer present. If you're asked to speak or give testimony or sign any kind of document, exercise your right to remain silent. Whether you are a citizen or whether you're undocumented, these constitutional principles of due process, of the right to remain silent, apply to you. If ICE appears at your door and says, we have a search warrant, make sure that it is a criminal search warrant signed by a judge. ICE warrants don't mean a damn thing here. If it's not a criminal search warrant signed by a judge, you can send them away. If it is, you need to be compliant in that standpoint because it can get worse otherwise. But even in that situation, do not speak to them until you have an attorney present. And if you don't have a lawyer, right now is the time to call one. And if English is not your first language, there are lawyers who will provide language translations for you. For everyone else, you can help protect immigrant communities by activating your local politics, contacting a member of Congress, invest in organizations like the National Immigrant Justice Center, educate yourself on the issues that are happening, and organize with your family and friends. Sanctuary locations are significant because while they don't have any legal authority, there were more than 800 churches under the last Trump administration that protected immigrants by providing them refuge against ICE. And ultimately, you have to stay informed. I'm writing about this stuff daily on my Substack. You can go to qasimrashid.com/subscribe. And look, at the end of the day, we need to invest in the kind of future that we want to create. My content will remain free, not behind a paywall, but I need your support. So definitely invest as best you can. My friends, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on social media across all platforms at Qasim Rashid. You have my commitment to continue to advance the show that builds on justice and compassion and accountability for those in power. We've got a great show lineup for next week. Be sure to tune in same time, same place at 10 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM channel 126, or hit subscribe on Substack and get it in your inbox the very next day. My friends, be fierce, lead with compassion and justice, and continue speaking truth to power. Until next week, peace.